When a tenant application does not make it through the credit report, there are steps that have to be taken to let the applicant know, and it's not just ghosting your applicants, so please don't do that. When landlords and property managers are finding tenants to fill their vacant units, they have to go through various steps. Some of these steps include finding the tenant, conducting a background check, credit screenings, and signing the lease agreement. However, not every tenant gets through the whole process. One of the steps that many applicants fail to get past is the credit screening. When an applicant doesn't pass this step, they're given something that is called an adverse action notice. And today we're going to be going over what an adverse action notice is and what causes one. So to start off, what is an adverse action notice? It's a document that serves to inform someone that their applicant has been denied due to information found on their credit report. Apart from stating why the applicant has been denied, the report should also contain some other information. Some of the most important pieces of information that must be included in one of these letters are the name, address, and phone of the consumer reporting agency, the credit score that was used, an anti-discrimination notice, a statement of action by the creditor, a statement of specific reasons the letter has been issued, and a notice to the applicant that they can request a copy of the free credit report that was used. It is essential that all of the information is included in a notice as required under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. If all the information above isn't included, especially the notices of the credit reporting agency and the free credit reports, you could be susceptible to lawsuits and disputes with the applicant. But luckily for you, I'm going to be covering everything there is to know about an adverse action notice in this video. And one of the most important things you need to know are the reasons to send an adverse action notice. And there are many reasons that could constitute to sending an adverse action notice. Some of the reasons are pretty obvious, like a low credit score, but some of them are a little more in depth. I'm going to be sharing the most common ones, but keep in mind there are some reasons that constitute sending an adverse action letter that I won't get to. Let's get started with some of the most common scenarios. One reason is the credit score does not meet the minimum requirement. A low credit score is detrimental to anyone trying to achieve a mortgage, a car, or anything that has to do with paying back a loan. The reason that a low credit score will turn away many landlords is that it represents a higher risk to them. A low credit score can happen for many reasons, most of which have to do with not paying bills on time. For this reason, it's very risky for a landlord to rent out to an individual with a denied credit score because they're most likely to have late or incomplete payments. Another reason is that there's too much debt compared to income. As a part of the consumer report, it is important to analyze the relationship between the amount of debt an applicant has and how much their income is. When an applicant has a lot of debt, it's a signal that they may not be able to pay the rent of the rental property. This is obviously not good for the landlord, as they would prefer an applicant with less debt and a higher income. And lastly, there's not enough credit history. This also results in lower possible credit scores, as it's a very important factor that is taken into account by any credit bureau. Having a long and positive credit history establishes that you have a history of high credit and will definitely help in your credit application. However, if you have a short credit history, there's not much proof that you'll be able to pay off any loan or rent you are given. So what information should you include if you need to write an adverse action letter? Some of the information is supplemental and should be included, but some of it actually is required by law. Let's go through some of the information that should always be included in adverse action notices. The first section of the notice should include some sort of introduction about yourself. The information in this section should include things like the date, the applicant's name, their address, and some other stuff. Then you should include a short message thanking the applicant for their time and effort regarding the application. Then in the next section, you should include the reasons that exist for taking the adverse action. Some of those reasons have already been discussed in this video, but there are other less common reasons that you can list. If there's more than one reason, you can choose multiple by having a list to check off. Also, if there's a reason that's not included in your list, you can add it at the bottom. Next, you can include information about how to appeal the adverse action notice. This should include instructions on how the applicant can send in some sort of appeal to the decision. There should also be a time period and contact information to send in the appeal. The next section is going to be the rights and protections, and it's extremely important as it's required under federal law. There should be information about the rights and protections granted to the applicant by the government. In this section, you can include information about the Fair Credit Reporting Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. If you don't know what those are, let me give a quick definition of each. So the Fair Credit Reporting Act is an act that serves to help consumers understand what actions they can take in regard to any credit decision. This act is very important because it is what allows the consumer to have knowledge about how their credit information is used. The FCRA gives the consumer the opportunity to know if their credit information is being used against the application. The act also gives the consumer the right to discover where all of the information used came from and how it was used in the decision. It's important to include information about this act in the letter because the consumer must know their rights. Also, it must be made clear to them how the information was obtained and how they can access a free copy of their credit report. And then there's the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. This act is an act that serves to protect credit applications from any sort of discrimination when it comes to their applications. The act states that individuals partaking in any credit application can only be evaluated using factors that are directly related to their credit worthiness. This means that creditors and lenders are not allowed to consider things like race, color, national origin, sex and gender, religion, marital status, and age. They're not allowed to consider any of those factors during any stage of the application process. And then in the last section of the adverse action notice, it should be some kind of ending statement. This is a nice section to include because it offers some contact information for any general inquiries or questions that the applicant may have. Now, hopefully you can go write a successful adverse action letter, and if this video helped you out in doing that, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more property management content. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!